Greetings, welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the annual Cancer new moon. A new moon is when the sun and the moon are of course unified, so the benefits of both are collaborating together. But the moon is the ruler of the sign of Cancer, of course, and close by is the exuberant, uplifting energies of Jupiter this year, which is also exalted in the sign of Cancer. So far, so good. We have an opportunity, therefore, over the month of its influence to set our intentions about the things the moon influences, how we feel about things, our home, our environment, our immediate senses, anything to do with our families, nurture, security and protectiveness. But also the passionate energies of Mars are in the practical Virgo, feeding into the combination of the Sun, the Moon, but also Jupiter in a very constructive way, suggesting we could be able to take some firm action in order to push forwards with the things that will help to enable all those different strands. But it's important when we talk about lunations that we don't just talk about them relatively superficially, because each one has its own personality, and this one actually has some very challenging energies too. I'm going to unpack all of this for you. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. A very warm welcome. Thank you so much for all your views and interactions. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please help it thrive and do so now. But also do remember to click or tap the bell notification symbol. If you become a member, thank you. I really appreciate your support. I have set the entry level price as affordable as possible. If you're a patron, or your support is also truly appreciated. If you'd like to talk with me one-to-one, please see my testimonials below. It's always very humbling what people say about working with me. Now, with year 2025 absolutely racing by, you can order your transits for next year now. You can also get the rest of this year free with my special package, but get 30% off, but also your Life Roadmap report. Please see the link below for more. That combination will give you searing insights to guide your moves, but also to apply them at just the right moments too. My new website at patrickarundell.com is absolutely thriving. Please join us. You can also download your free daily written horoscope too, and get that fired to your device each morning as well. So when we talk about lunations, there is a tendency, I think, for people to talk a lot about them in perhaps a more earthy way, more that comes from the earth principle, and that's really very positive. The moon, of course, very much about cycles and very much about how it affects our moods. And the sign of Cancer can be a little bit moody at times, but it's also important to see that big picture, because each individual lunation is so very different. So as much as Jupiter does bless this new moon, Mars energizes it. It is the case that Pluto, the planet of truth and transformation, but also of neat power, is in a difficult quincunx, and also is in a quincunx with Mars too. In fact, Saturn and Neptune are squaring the position of the moon, Jupiter and the sun. A very challenging influence, and we have Neptune there as well. Now, Mars forges what's known as a yod and is the finger of God back to the positions of Pluto and Saturn and Neptune. But if we think about it, Mars and Pluto are the co-regents of the sign of Scorpio, but they're also very much to do with the battle of wills. And particularly Mars in the sign of Virgo can be about details, can be very meticulous, but we need to know what the event charts are saying, both from a Placidus, natal viewpoint, but also a solar perspective, because that helps us to really get the detail of what we can expect over the next month and makes it much easier to set our intentions in a more achievable and realistic way. So when we see lots of information on social media about moons and they're this and they're that, and you can do this and you can renew that and the other, they're completely disregarding that big picture, which is rather frustrating, because astrology gives us the tools to really understand things in a much more penetrative but also meaningful way. So on the screen now, I'm showing the exact timings for all the major cities of the world. It is all through the day, the 25th on this occasion. But I'm going to share with you your zodiac sign towards the end of this video. But on the screen now, I'm showing the event chart based on Universal Central Time and Greenwich, not London. Why do I use Greenwich? Because of the prime meridian. And therefore, I feel we can all, wherever we are in the world, collectively relate to this event in a much more accurate way. And you can see the ascendant is in the aforementioned sign of Virgo, where Mars is. We do have the path of fortune you can see on the ascendant, which is encouraging. So if we take care of our physical health, that's a good way to nurture our emotional well-being, which obviously can be supported by Cancer new moons. But you can see that Mars is in the 12th house. Mars in the 12th house can be when energies have been festering deeply in the depths, sometimes in our subconsciouses, sometimes, as we've seen in international affairs, resentments or injustices that have been perceived over a long period of time can suddenly come up in a much more warlike way. We've also got Pluto in the 5th house. In the sign of Aquarius, Pluto is the planet of the collective, but in the sign of Aquarius, it's about us together, our mutual networks, but it's in the 5th house. Now the 5th house can be very joyful and playful, but it also can be about risk. So what we've got is Mars and Pluto are not aligning, therefore they're not connected together in a very positive way. You can also see that Saturn and Neptune are in the 7th house of open enemies, Mars in the 12th house of secret enemies. So those open enemies are where people are trying to assert particular boundaries. Now, in international affairs, we have seen in some situations people being very assertive and ruthless in terms of saying or acting out what they want, but there are other situations in the world which somehow have been unchecked, that have been allowed to carry. So that's where the politics is going. But if you look at the position of Saturn and Neptune, they're actually in a terrific angle to Pluto. Absolutely lovely. So Mars is not connecting to Saturn and Neptune as well as it could, again in a quincunx. So Mars in that 12th house, secret enemies, imperfections that people may perceive, or maybe people being obsessed, which can be a Mars energy through its rulership of Scorpio, with what they perceive as unfairnesses or old grudges, and those are frothing up, coming to the surface in the most nasty and vicious ways. But if we look where the collective of the Sun, the Moon and Jupiter are, they're in the 10th house of the world at large. So we can think, yes, there is an opportunity for a reset, but look at the position of Saturn and Neptune to Jupiter, the Moon and the Sun. Those relationships, in some ways, the potential for a more positive nurture are afflicted by the greater malefic Saturn trying to set the terms of reference, and that's kind of forcing how it should be. So the 10th house is very much our worldly interaction. So as much as we may think that the Cancer new moon can be very much about milk and honey, very much about improving our home situations, being very close to people that we would like to have positive relationships with, the chances are in this particular event over the next month that we are going to encounter people who don't necessarily understand where we're coming from. They don't get what we need. We could become much more conscious who threatens our sense of security rather than having an opportunity to develop it. But that doesn't mean to say we shouldn't try. way. Now on the screen now I'm sharing the solar event chart, which gives us an indication from the overall zodiac. So we're starting at 0 degrees Aries, the vernal point, and guess what? Saturn and Neptune are there. One of the things that I think a lot of people are suffering with at the moment is very low physical vitality. The sign of Aries is about energy. It's about our bodies. It's about how we actualize things by getting them moving. But Saturn slows things down. It restrains and restricts. It's also in its fall in the sign of Aries. Not a great position at all. Neptune distorts. And because they're both squaring back to the collective, the posse in Cancer of Jupiter, the Moon and the Sun, Mercury coming to the end of its journey there, you can see that fourth house energy is inhibited by someone who's overreaching their right to have an authority. So we have seen people making what you could call, I suppose, individual decisions that are affecting an awful lot of us, but not necessarily in a very constructive way. But we can do things with the help of Mars's link back to Jupiter, the Sun and Moon, can do practical things. We can become much more conscious of who's not right for us. There are some relationships that are not worth working on. However much we try, there can be points in our situations where it's better to cut the ties. But it's also very important that we try our hardest to make it happen. And perhaps Pluto in the sociable sign of Aquarius is saying that before we make that decision, we should absolutely check that we've done our level best to try to be inclusive, supportive and nurturing, maybe to someone around us who's been going through a little bit of a difficult time. Property can also be very much linked to the sign of Cancer, and definitely in terms of feeling that we're safe and secure. So if mortgage rates are uncertain, the cost of borrowing is rather uncertain too, that creates a pressure. We also know there's a lack of availability, which creates too much demand. So that's also the way that Pluto feeding into this event is making us aware that there needs to be a reset, and it's a reset that doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon, when we've got so many world leaders totally focused on short-term expediency from their perspective, not what's necessarily best for us as a collective. So I feel that we do need to become much more conscious of our connections in a positive and dynamic way, work on the good ones, become more cautious of anyone who tries to steal our power or tries in any way to bully us or prevent us from enjoying peace in our homes, whether it is a neighbour who tends to go beyond what's acceptable in terms of making their point about what they find difficult. It is a chance to have positivity over the next month, but we do need to be realistic. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs, from Aries through to Pisces. So Aries, the next month we can think about things in terms of the practical dimension, but also the emotional and spiritual dimension. The emotional and spiritual dimension are particularly enriched because of the role of Jupiter in the mix of this new moon. And if you did want in some ways to evolve your inner journey, definitely an opportunity to do so. What might stop you? Well, I feel that Saturn and Neptune being so close together in your sign could in some ways see you feel a little bit inhibited. Perhaps if you're someone who's been brought up in an environment where you were always expected to just crack on whenever things were perhaps a little tricky, you may have not over time really given yourself permission, because you were never taught to do so, to just pause and just get in touch with how things truly feel. So you could do that at this time. If you want to engage with the energy of your ruler Mars in its link, which is very dynamic to the Sun, Jupiter and the Moon, you could do some catching up with do-it-yourself tasks, perhaps to do with painting and decorating, enjoying your garden. All those things could give you a greater sense of satisfaction. But whatever we do in the practical security sphere, really what we're trying to do in a way, the metaphor is it makes us feel better inside. It's a bit like when we do housework. if you are someone who's pretty good at keeping up with the domestic chores, you may not feel this quite as obviously. But if you're someone who tends to be a little bit more easygoing, when we do have that tidy up and sort out and declutter, it tends to actually move things at an emotional level. So whatever the type of ram you are, you can work on that inner journey, but also the practical journey. But it's whether you will find the spark to do so, because with Saturn and Neptune so early in your sign and squaring up with the position of Jupiter, the Sun, the Moon, but also in the quincunx with your ruler Mars, you could find yourself, if you're not particularly settled at the moment, just finding it difficult to get off the roundabout of feeling a bit depleted, of not really quite having the appetite to get stuck in. And it would be entirely understandable, to be honest. What might feel more attractive is to get together with people that you enjoy socially and actually just in some ways not focus too much on what feels painful or sore. But one of the things that Saturn can do through to the end of August for you is actually give you more resilience than you might imagine. And also because it's the start of a new journey that first began last time, about 29.5 years ago. This first blush of Saturn being in the sign of Aries through to the end of August is a little bit of an inside track of how things will be from February next year when he returns. So if you put in motion now just the intention to become more available to your own inner needs, even if you don't have the wherewithal to actually make firm steps into it at the moment, just decide that's something that appeals to you. You are actually taking a step forwards, but also taking into account that your energy may be just a little bit fragmented by different demands. One of the things that I think that Jupiter and Saturn in a square can do is actually give us realistic expectations. You know, I read or watched so many videos pop up in my YouTube stream about Jupiter being in Cancer and being exalted and how amazing it was, totally not taking into account the return chart of when Jupiter arrived in Cancer, which had Saturn there as the handbrake. But what Saturn can do is actually make Jupiter more realistic. So for example, if you're setting your intentions to have a massive house, but you don't have the means to deliver it, that's just going to lead to a disappointment. So your realism doesn't have to pulverize your passion, but it can shape it in a more constructive way. But if there is someone around you who tends to be very cold and limiting every time you do want to open up and share how you feel, and it may well be somebody in your family situation, I think that you could develop a determination over this new moon to break free of their apparent control or influence over your situation. But I think the pace of it will really start to shape up from the middle of February next year. But that can also be when you truly break free. So Taurus, for you, this new moon may be hosted by the emotional energies of Cancer, but it's very much about your third house, which is quick communications. One of the challenges with quick communications, because we live in a world where people are very impulsive about sharing their opinions, is that we don't always take the time to just reflect on what's really meaningful for us. But if you did want to create greater excitement around your social interaction over the next month, the fact that Mars links so vibrantly and energetically to Jupiter, the Sun and the Moon suggests that your words can carry more power, more conviction, but also be very inspiring to the people you encounter. What's not to like? Well, it's just that the position of Saturn and Neptune are in the part of your chart which is to do with the psychological domain, can be to do with our shadow side, and sometimes the things that we're not so aware of. So it is possible that you could say something, perhaps in an emotional way, which is triggered somehow by something that's deeply rooted within you from the past. And it may come up in a romantic situation, because Mars in the 5th house, very much to do with being much more interactive and playful. And perhaps if you're in a relationship where you are getting on very well, you can have a lovely and very exciting time over the next month. But if there are some old issues rattling away in the depth, they could have a tendency, I feel, to pop up and into the open. Also, in terms of Pluto, back to Mars, that part of the yod for you, if you're in a professional situation where you don't feel very seen, heard, recognised, or you're just finding your role very boring and it doesn't really grip your attention, that may be something you really need to think about, because Pluto's going to be in your 10th house for a very long time, and some kind of transition may be required, and that transition may mean in some ways working on some of your weaknesses with Saturn and Neptune, at least in the case of Saturn to the end of August, being in the part of your chart to do with vulnerabilities. So if there are particular professional qualifications or experiences that you could have and you'd like to have but you don't have, perhaps what they're suggesting to you is that there may be a need to pitch in and use the energy of this 3rd house new moon to engage with the points of reference and information so that you can get the ball rolling in terms of signing up for courses, becoming much more au fait with the things that will give you the full range of skills to apply for the type of roles that will be exciting in the years to come. But generally speaking, I think this can be a bubbly time. If you can get together with people who make you feel good and enjoy some bright and sparkling conversations, wonderful. But I just feel that if there's someone around you that you're not so sure of, someone who's not perhaps quite as loyal, a fair weather friend, that could come up over the next 4 weeks too. So Gemini, as this new moon comes together, we have Mercury, your ruler, on the last degree, the anaretic degree of the sign of Cancer. So something you've been mulling over, you can start to express in a much more crisp and constructive way very soon, because Mercury links brilliantly to the sometimes restrictive energies of Saturn. So your idea could be very well worked out. But it's important with a Cancerian new moon, for you personally, to be in touch with the feeling dimension as well as your ideas, because with Jupiter in the mix too, your enthusiasm could be absolutely fantastic. And the practical location of Virgo suggests that maybe a hobby or an interest can come to the centre of your world over the next month, give you a lot of pleasure, a lot of self-satisfaction, but also make you feel better about you. And that's what Cancer's about, the feeling. So if you feel good, that's a win. But you could have a win-win, because that idea or hobby could also bring in some extra money too. If there is a catch, I feel it may be because Saturn and Neptune are just saying to you, if there is someone you could collaborate with that might not quite share the same values as you, or perhaps you're already involved with them, that may be something that could be more challenging. You may find yourself also attracted to a shortcut or some kind of hack, fair play, but if it's something that's downright unethical, that also could be something that might not work out for you for the long term. But if you can stay in touch with the feeling side of things, but also your more enjoyment-led side of things, with Jupiter pushing you to enjoy the good things in life, whether you get together with some friends and enjoy a nice celebration, but I do feel that there are going to be some interesting ideas about revenue, finance, money that are going to be exchanged too. So Cancer, you have a reputation of being very nurturing, very supportive and caring for others. But your new moon this year, with Jupiter in the mix, is really encouraging you to focus on what you need to do for you, the individual. For sure, you can listen to your instincts, something you often do. Mars is giving you extra vitality with its link to Jupiter and the Sun and the Moon. So there's a lot to go for there. So if there's something you'd like to start afresh, this could be a good time to really go for it. But there may also be something that you're already involved with that, as much as it's still going forwards, maybe has dipped a little bit in terms of the speed of progress. So a great chance to inject some new vitality and enthusiasm into the mix. What could be a little bit more challenging is that if you're someone who wants to be more in touch with your unique self, but you have to in some ways exist within a big corporation, or perhaps you have the expectations of parents or partner, or maybe just the real life demands of paying the mortgage, you could feel a little bit conflicted between what you want to do for you and what the essential realities are allowing. And that may not be quite so easy to offset, particularly with Pluto in the part of your situation to do with shared finances, your long-term financial future. Being individual is not necessarily going to give you everything you need. So I think the best way to deal with this situation at the moment is certainly give yourself the permission to demonstrate what a one-off you are, just how much talent and brilliance you've got to share. But there may be some compromises that you need to accept are part of the equation. But if you are a natural bohemian, I think this could be the chance that you completely break away from something that you just feel is holding you back from really being the true person you need to be for you. But if you do want to get that balance between the material and the spiritual and emotional, and where you take action with your energy, some compromises may be necessary, to be honest. So Leo, the annual Cancer new moon is always an opportunity for your sign to take a pause, to give yourself permission to embrace the more healing and spiritual dimension of life. Over the last few weeks, Mercury, the planet of communication, has also been going through the sign of Cancer, perhaps evoking some anxieties. Now, it's about to emerge into your sign on the 26th and forge a very constructive link to Saturn and Neptune. So if there has been something that's outstanding that you're uncertain about, some good news could be coming soon. But equally, because of Saturn and Neptune squaring up with this new moon and Jupiter, if there is something you've been really avoiding, maybe someone is going to say something or perhaps be a little bit more direct or honest, and it could hit a bit of a raw spot within your being over the next 4 weeks. Now, Mars is in a part of your situation which is very much about the physical realm, but it's linked back to the 12th house energy. Also suggests that you could find yourself linking to someone from your past over the next few weeks, or at least thinking about them, and that actually may be something that's very uplifting for you. But essentially, because your sign really is very charismatic, warmth, can be very authoritative, in a way you're being asked to embrace the more vulnerable side of yourself. Now, if that means stepping back a little bit, giving yourself those moments of rest, reflection, and healing, that can be very nurturing and very positive for you. But if you resist that because you see that as almost being a bit of a weakness, that will make this particular new moon much more challenging, I feel. So we live in a world that's very complex, very challenging. Yes, it's important to be respected. That's something that it really is at the centre of your philosophy. But if you need to take some moments for you to connect to someone who can be a giver of information or advice or knowledge to help shape your inner world in a more positive and constructive way, do seize the opportunity. Virgo, your friendships and social connections and networks can really be lit up by this particular new moon, but you could find yourself at the heart of whatever alliances and collaborations you're taking part in. So your leadership qualities can come to the fore, but at the same time, that ability to link together with people and work on mutual interests or hobbies is really going to be very positive. What may be more challenging is that with Saturn and Neptune in the part of your chart to do with deep involvements, if you're not feeling it around certain connections and you don't really feel that they are going to be part of your long-term plan and future, this could be a time when you decide to make a change. because Mars can make you bolder and braver about going for what's right for you. And of course, Mars is also in that quincunx with Pluto in the 6th house of practicalities. That's a part of your chart that's to do with where you're very conscious about obligations. But Mars is pushing you to be braver about doing what's right for you. And because the 8th house energy is Saturn and Neptune can be where we're most invested, you may find a more idealistic side of your nature is coming up at this present time, and most of all giving you the push and the confidence to do something that really excites you, and especially because Uranus and Mercury are in such a very bright and bubbly and effervescent combination. So taking a little bit of a walk on the wild side may really appeal to you, and that could see some new friendships and associations over this next 4 weeks. So Libra, your leadership qualities are very much to the fore with this particular new moon. The enthusiasm and faith of Jupiter can help you to put your personal best foot forward. So if you're applying for a job, you're linking up with influential people, the confidence and self-belief you have could be infectious. But for you, uniquely, because Mars is in your 12th house, although he is forging such a constructive link to the trio of energy in the sign of Cancer, he's also saying that it's important to stay conscious of past skills and experiences and all the things that you've learned. And sometimes it's not just the self-confidence that gets us to where we want to be. It is, of course, relationships. And few signs understand that better than yours. But because Saturn and Neptune are occupying your relationship sector and are in such a tough right angle with that trio of players in such a positive alliance, it's suggesting that if there is someone you need to link with who's a little bit less invested in what you have to offer or what you want to do, that could cause you to really feel very, very frustrated if things don't go quite to plan or quite as quickly as you would like. So how do you deal with this? I feel that your diplomacy, your natural gift for diplomacy, can be part of the process. Even if you have to grit your teeth, even if you only get some small wins to begin with, just understand that the influence of this event provides a backdrop for the next month, but the influence of Jupiter in your 10th house goes on through to next year. So you have a chance through to the end of June 2026 to use the positivity and fortune of Jupiter very much to your advantage. There's also going to be a lovely link between Jupiter and Venus, your ruler, that occurs exactly on the 12th of August. In fact, from the 9th to the 15th of August, and also once Mars moves into your sign on the 7th of August, but gets beyond the opposition to Saturn and Neptune, he forges a stunning alliance to Uranus and Pluto. So if things aren't quite going exactly at the pace you would like, know that you're sowing the seeds. And the seeds are the ability to understand the emotional dimension, but at the same time still be ambitious. So you can make progress, it's just possibly not going to be as speedy as you would like. Scorpio, you have an appreciation of continuity, but what you're being offered with this particular new moon is the chance to be much more daring, to break free, to be more spontaneous, to give yourself some liberty, independence and space. You can do it with your partner through travel. For example, you could go to places that you haven't been to before, which really can refresh your senses. Jupiter can be very much about, in the 9th house as it is, about things like culture and history, art galleries. If you are going somewhere further afield, understanding the historical context of the place you visit, all really interesting. And Mars, your traditional ruler, is feeding the process by giving you a lot of extra dynamism and enthusiasm for that sense of change. What's not to like? Well, it's just that Pluto's in the very deep and emotional 4th house, and Saturn and Neptune are in the part of your chart to do with obligations, routines, responsibilities. If you feel that breaking free will let someone down, it's going to conflict you. So you'll need to decide what your priorities are. But if you do need some time off, or you need a colleague to cover you, or some child or pet care, it will of course require some planning and organisation, and people will need to support you. But I think in general what you're really craving for is to break out and just be a much freer spirit over the next 4 weeks. Sagittarius, the Cancer new moon, is very much about what we share. It can be where we're most invested, even devoted, but it also can be about what changes, what's evolving in our lives. With Saturn and Neptune in the part of your chart to do with sociability, to do with potentially romance and play, if you're connected to someone where you feel trapped, there may be some kind of psychological sense of being locked in. That can feed that part of your nature that loves freedom. And that could therefore give you the desire to break free, because Jupiter is in the mix, your ruler. The quest for knowledge that Jupiter gives you is often a lifetime one. Mars is also very enabling with the position of Jupiter, the Sun and the Moon. So if you are someone who's more entrepreneurial, this could be an exciting next month. But if you're gripped into or feel trapped into a situation which is very intense, maybe feels a bit controlling or even a bit possessive, that may be something that you're going to want to resist. And the evolution may be finding the ways to exit what's not really working for you. Conversations are going to be needed. With Pluto not linking particularly well with your ruler, it would be easy to get at odds with someone because you don't quite chime in the right way. So patience is going to be important, but just know that something can evolve. It can be very positive, but you can't boss the whole process, which Mars may tempt you into thinking you can. It is going to be a bit of a give and take, but you do have the right for escape, and that's going to be presented when Mercury moves into the sign of Leo on the 26th of June and links much more constructively to Saturn and Neptune and teases that part of you that does like to be a free spirit. So in other words, when we're devoted and invested, it has to really feel right, whether it's psychologically, romantically or financially. And if you don't, something will need to make way. If you do feel comfortable, something can grow and get much deeper and firmer over the next month. So Capricorn, if you recall, when Jupiter moved into your 7th house, into the sign of Cancer, where it's exalted, you may have read or watched videos suggesting that this was going to bring some marvellous events to your relationship sector through to the end of June next year. And it can. But because your stern and cautious ruler Saturn was at a right angle with Jupiter when it arrived, which peaked again on the 15th of June, you're also being encouraged not to invest too much in people that you don't know tremendously well, and that the best of relationships do take time to build up trust and understanding. And that's where we are with this new moon. There is the chance to forge some very collaborative links over the next 4 weeks. If you're travelling, with Mars also in a very exciting, daring part of your chart, you may encounter someone you find really great company. That's absolutely lovely. But if you're wanting a relationship to get deeper and really balance between what you give and get, Saturn is there like a sentry, just suggesting that you don't rush the process. Now, on this particular event, Uranus, the planet of surprises, in your sector of sociability, is linking brilliantly with Mercury coming to the end of its journey through Cancer. So I feel that you could really have a connection, but I don't feel that you should drop your guard too much. Saturn and Neptune are saying, good to be open, but good also to be watchful. And that's really where it's at. Be watchful, be hopeful, but in an ongoing relationship, if you feel that someone is not respecting your boundaries, is not really understanding the support that you give them, you could find yourself being much firmer about the way you tell them what you're disappointed about over the next 4 weeks. So Aquarius, I feel that this new moon could emphasize where you're very obliging and helpful to others, perhaps to do with your work, maybe domestically, but is that actually too much of a load-in on you? Because Saturn, your traditional ruler, is making you conscious that your nervous system only has a certain amount of output, and therefore if you can make some virtuous changes to improve the domestic organisation, have a better share of who does and contributes what, at work if you're doing things that actually give you a sense of satisfaction, and you're just finding a nice balance. So it's a new moon that's not particularly sexy, to be honest. It is about trying to eat better, get the exercise, get a bit more organised, do the decluttering, tidy up, get routines working a little better, but be led by how you feel. Be conscious the nervous system with Saturn and Neptune may be a little bit overloaded at the present time. So the virtue actually can help to liberate you to have more physical vitality. The link with Mars, I think, can be very good, because when it comes to looking at the details, which can also be the 6th house, Mars gives you a bit more strength and determination to tease out some facts and figures about how you can make some small but important changes that are better for you financially. But also the combination of the moon and Jupiter in the 6th house could see you very drawn towards perhaps a furry friend. If you're someone who really loves animals, you may find your connection with them gets more enriching over the next 4 weeks. So Pisces, you're being encouraged with this new moon and your traditional ruler right at the heart of it to enjoy yourself, to mix and mingle, to be much more playful, self-expressive over the next month. It's just your modern ruler is squaring with your traditional ruler, and along with its alliance with Saturn is also pushing you to be aware of the foundations of your life and staying grounded, not getting too caught up in extravagance, and perhaps burning the candle at both ends. If you are tempted by something that's more speculative, don't get into it in a way that extends your situation beyond what feels comfortable and safe. Now, because Mars, the planet of action, is in your sector of relating, you could have a dazzling connection with someone over the next month. But conversely, if you're in a tie already, a difference of values or something historic with Pluto in your 12th house clashing with Mars in your 7th house, but also the position of the Sun, Jupiter and the Moon, suggests that the best way to deal with this situation is not to try to brush it off. You can be very flamboyant with all that 5th house energy, but it's important actually, if someone does have a different viewpoint, to receive it. Mars on the 7th house could make you quite brusque. Well, that's the way it is, that's the way I am. That kind of defensiveness will not be useful to you over the next month. So if someone does see something differently, try to embrace their point of view with affection, even if it's difficult to hear. But if you are footloose and fancy free, you could be in for a very playful and enjoyable time over the next month. Thank you so much for joining me for this Cancer New Moon Deep Dive special. Please join me at patrickarundell.com for more information.